Welcome to Stories from the Teacher's Desk. This is where educators connect, share, and grow.
In each episode, we share inspiring stories, practical strategies, and innovative solutions to empower teachers and transform classrooms around the world.
We've got a really interesting study for you. It's titled Improving Students' Speaking Skills in English Classes by Using Open Questions and Interactive Speaking Methods. This one comes from the Nazarbayev Intellectual School of Chemistry and Biology over in Kazakhstan.
Now, yeah, that might sound super specific, like just about one school, but the core ideas, they're actually incredibly relevant for anyone interested in, well, how we learn to communicate better, whether you're a student, an educator, or honestly, just someone who wants to have better conversation.
Exactly. Being able to communicate clearly, confidently, it's just so crucial in, well, pretty much everything. And this research, it's detailed in what they call a research lesson study report by Abidala Tiarova, Emi Rashutova, ZHK Zerbayeva, and Ovi Zibir. It looks at some really practical, down-to-earth ways to help people get more fluent and feel more sure of themselves when they talk.
So our mission today for this deep dive is pretty straightforward. We're going to unpack this report, grab the most important findings, and lay them out in a way that's crystal clear, engaging, and totally jargon-free for you. Think of us as your friendly translators for this piece.
Okay, let's get into it. The researchers started by zeroing in on a really common problem. A lot of students just hang back in speaking activities or class discussions. They tend to stay quiet, maybe a bit nervous about putting themselves out there. The big question they wanted to tackle was pretty simple. How can we help students get better at speaking English in class?
Right. And their main hypothesis, their big idea, was that the way teachers ask questions and the types of activities they use could make a massive difference. They specifically focused on using open-ended questions, the kind that need more than a yes-no. They actually make you think, and these things called interactive speaking methods, which are basically activities designed to get students talking to each other.
Now, this study, it wasn't huge. They worked with 25 students, grade 11, so around 16, 17 years old. What's really interesting about their school, though, is its curriculum. It's a mix of Kazakh and Cambridge International approaches. And crucially, for these older students, subjects like science, tech, they're actually taught in English. So being good at speaking English isn't just for English class, it's fundamental for them to succeed in their other subjects too.
Yeah, that context really underscores why boosting speaking skills is so vital there. So the researchers, they used a mix of methods to see if their ideas were working. They had speaking tasks before and after trying the new methods. They observed the students in class, and they actually asked the students for feedback directly.
And here's the core finding, like the big takeaway right off the bat. The study clearly showed that when teachers used these open-ended questions and the interactive activities, students got way more involved and felt more confident speaking. Even the kids who were usually pretty hesitant started participating more. It wasn't just about talking more, it was about the quality too.
Which is really encouraging, isn't it? It suggests that, relatively simple shifts in teaching practice can have a really noticeable positive impact on students' willingness and ability to speak up.
All right, let's dig a bit deeper into that first key method.
Yeah.
Open-ended questioning. We all know closed questions, right? Like, did you like the book? Yes. No. Simple. But an open-ended one gets you thinking, explaining, like, what did you find most compelling about the book's main character and why? See the difference?
Exactly. It just opens the door for more thought, more language. And the researchers, they point out there's actually quite a bit of existing research backing this up. Names like Walsh, Mercer, Gabrielatos come up. These aren't just random ideas. They're rooted in language acquisition theory. Their work suggests these kinds of questions really push students to produce more language and think more deeply.
So it wasn't just about asking better questions. They also tried out specific interactive speaking methods. They used 3 different ones over 3 lessons, just to give you a taste. Something called the Socratic method, then beat the panel, and finally, quiz trade. Sounds kind of fun, actually.
They do sound engaging. Let's start with the Socratic method as they applied it. At its core, the Socratic method is about inquiry, right? The teacher guides understanding through questions, not just lecturing. So in this lesson, students watched a video, great title, Could We Speak the Language of Dolphins? And then they discussed it, driven by questions.
What I thought was really smart was the setup. They had an inner circle of participants and an outer circle of observers, and then they swapped roles. And the researchers specifically noted, even some students who weren't usually big talkers actually initiated conversation, when they were in that participant role. It shows how changing the dynamic.
Lowers the pressure, yeah. It gives everyone a defined role, a chance to contribute actively. The report even gives us a peek at 3 specific students, their case studies. Case student 3, who was initially quiet, share a really specific point from the video, something like dolphins have unique whistles, like names. Shows they're absorbing it, even if quiet at first.
Exactly. And then you had case student 1, already more confident, participating loads, adding extra info.
Yeah.
And case student 2 is asking good questions, keeping it moving. It shows how one method can engage different levels.
Okay, moving to lesson 2, this beat the panel method. This involved reading a text, another really thought-provoking one. After the robot revolution, what will be left for our children to do?
Whoa, yeah, that'll get you thinking. So, after reading, a small group, the panel, discussed it. The rest of the class got to ask the panel questions. And the cool thing was, the class earned points for asking well-structured questions, kind of gamified it, made everyone listen closely.
Right. And the report mentions case student 2 asking a really sharp question. What are the ethical implications of replacing human workers with robots? Good stuff. And again, case student 3, the quieter one, surprised them, showed good comprehension, even asked, could there be any jobs that robots will never replace? It really seems these activities were helping him, come out of his shell a bit.
And finally, lesson 3, quiz trade. This sounds like a fun vocabulary review. Students got cards, word on one side, definition on the other, from the previous lesson on children's rights. They'd pair up, quiz each other, and then I like this bit they had to give a quick greeting, like a high five or a nod, before finding a new partner.
Yeah, adds that little social active element, keeps the energy up. The researchers noticed case student 3 seemed really into this one and even realized, hey, I need to practice my vocab more. It's simple, but effective for getting everyone involved and moving.
So looking at all 3 lessons together, the overall impact, really positive. The researchers saw more students joining in, more talking between students, and real progress, especially for those who were usually reluctant. And it wasn't just a gut feeling. They had teacher notes and student feedback saying they liked the activities, felt they learned better, listened more.
And that student voice is key, isn't it? It shows they felt the difference. They recognized the value in these active learning approaches.
How did they actually measure the impact, like quantify it? They used speaking tests, one before they started these methods and one after. And since it was a newly formed class, they also compared the results to a speaking test from the very first term, giving them a baseline.
Right, so they could track the change. The report highlights those 3 case students again. It's interesting, case student 3, the initially quieter one, showed a jump in scores right after that first lesson, the Socratic one. It's quite something to see that kind of shift.
Yeah, and case students 1 and 2, who started stronger, they showed a steady upward trend by the end of the 3rd lesson. But case student 3, he maintained that initial improvement throughout. So while the confident speakers kept growing, these methods really seem to give that initially hesitant student a significant leg up.
The specific scores are there in a table if people want the nitty-gritty, but the overall picture is clear. Improvement across the board, especially for the student who needed it most.
And beyond test scores, the researchers noticed other key improvements just by observing the class. Students generally seemed more self-assured, the shy ones spoke up more, their answers got longer, more detailed, and they started using facts from the lessons to back up their opinions. Which is exactly what you want, right? Not just more talk, but more thoughtful, supported talk.
Definitely. And there was another tool they used, which I think is really valuable, a student reflection journal. Basically, a notebook for students to think about their own learning, what clicked, what was tough, what they wanted to work on. It's about metacognition, thinking about your thinking.
That's brilliant, making learning visible to the learner themselves. The prompts were simple but effective, like what did I learn today and what was challenging for me. Helps them identify their own strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah, and the report even has a quote from a student, something like, I didn't realize how much I was learning until I wrote it down. That really hits home the power of reflection. And a teacher observed that students got more engaged because they could pinpoint where they needed help. Simple idea, big impact.
So what are the big implications here, the main takeaways for us? Well, the researchers suggest this blend, open questions plus interactive methods, is a really solid way for educators to, modernize things, shift the focus from passive listening to active student involvement.
Exactly. It really drives home that creating chances for students to use the language meaningfully and prompting critical thought with open questions can seriously boost both their confidence and their actual speaking skills.
Okay, so we've really dug into this research. hopefully for you listening, this gives you a really clear grasp of the main points without needing to wade through the whole academic report. We aim to explain this paper in a very easy, accessible way, showing how pretty straightforward teaching tweaks can make a real difference.
Absolutely. It's about getting you those key insights quickly and clearly practical strategies for improving communication.
So here's a little something to mull over. How would these ideas, asking more open-ended questions, making things more interactive, apply in your life? Maybe in work meetings or when you're learning something new, or even just in everyday chats. Could you ask more questions that invite deeper answers? Could you find more interactive ways to learn or discuss things?
Yeah, it's a good prompt. Makes you think about how we can all be more active communicators, both speaking and listening. And if this deep dive sparked your interest, maybe look into those specific methods. Socratic Seminar, Beat the Panel, Quiz Trade. See how they work in detail? Or even try a reflection journal for your own learning.
Definitely some food for thought there. There's always more to explore, but hopefully this gave you a solid starting point.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We hope you found it insightful. Keep exploring, keep learning, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend and stay tuned for the next one.